in section 8.2, now we're going to be doing the graphs here. So we already know what the perfect competition market looks like. It's just supply and demand. Good thing we already covered that. So all that is a downward sloping demand, upward sloping supply, and then we have the equilibrium. So let's call it P0, Q0. Okay, so that's our price and quantity. Now, that's the market. So, like, that's all the buyers and all the sellers that we have. So, if you had a town, right, the market, right, and they all sell the identical t shirt, and you were to look at each individual firm, that all of those are the supply. Okay, so if we had the street, we had firm A, B, C, and D. All of these firms are the supply. All of them are the supply. But A is a firm, B is a firm, C and D are firms. So therefore, this would be firm A. Let's just firm A. All right, so what do we know about a perfect competition? They are price takers. So they take the market price. What that's going to look like is this. We're going to go a straight line across, and that's going to be the firm's price. Let's call it PF for the firm. Now, the demand for the firm is really interesting because, right, if they were to raise price, does anybody buy from this firm? No, right? So basically, like, you can sell as much as you want at this price. You have many buyers. So at this price here, at PF, you can sell as much as you want. So that's your demand. So your demand for your firm is a horizontal line. Okay? A horizontal line. Now, what we're going to find out is that this is also your marginal revenue. Okay? So not only is that your demand curve, but it's also your marginal revenue. And if you don't believe me, right, look here. Look at the marginal revenue. It's 40 the whole way, right? So therefore, right here, the firm's price, right there, that demand curve, all of that quantity that you're selling is your marginal revenue. Okay? Now, as we discussed with the production cost, right, what are we missing here? We need the marginal cost. Boom. Remember, marginal cost is just a Nike swish, all right? So that's what's going to be there, just a Nike swish. Okay? So what does a firm always want to do? A firm wants to do marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Okay? So that happens right here, where the marginal revenue and the marginal cost are equal. The next thing you want to do is find out Q star. Q star meaning what is the firm making? So here. So Q star. All you did was go straight down. Okay? So that's how we find that. Now, then we got to figure out profits. Well, in order to find profits, we have the revenue, but we also need the total cost. And so what we're needing, right, we have the marginal cost. We need the average total cost. So let's say the average total cost was here. Does this make sense? No. This does not make sense because remember, the minimum of the ATC, that has to be at the marginal cost. All right, so right here, let's do this. We have boom, minimum, and then up. So that's the ATC. So here's the tricky part. Okay, so we did the ATC correctly because it's the smiley face, and the minimum is right there at the marginal cost, so that is correct. Now, how much is our profit? At this quantity, we have our price, okay, and at this quantity, this is our average total cost. So this is our ATC. Okay, just go straight up. Okay, that quantity right here, straight up, that's your price and that's your ATC. So this area right here, this shaded area, is your profits. Notice that I'm not going over on a different curve. I'm going straight up on quantity. That's all I'm doing. Okay. So this is what the perfect competition graph looks like. We have a market, we have a firm, and on the firm graph we have the marginal revenue, we have the marginal cost, and the ATC. Okay. And then we can find the area of profits. Now, remember, when we're trying to maximize profits, we do marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Always. Always maximize profits, margin revenue equals marginal cost. And that happens right here, where the marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost. You're going to get sick of me here. You're going to get sick of hearing that from me, but that's what profit max is. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So for a perfect competition, right, your marginal revenue is the same as your demand, and that's also your price. So for perfect competition, your price is your marginal cost. And this is because your price is the marginal revenue. So you can get away with that with perfect competition. So does maximizing profit imply actual economic profit? Because remember, economic profit has that opportunity cost in it. So, this really depends on if it's included in the ATC. Most of the time, we assume this is included in the ATC because it's the total cost of running a business, right? The opportunity cost and the cost of doing something. So when we're doing these graphs here, we will assume that this is the economic cost of doing something. Okay? So therefore, the profit margin, okay, how much more money you're making than it costs you to make. So the price minus the ATC, the profit margin, that's going to be how much money you're making extra on top of the cost. Okay? Now remember, I mentioned this, wherever your price is equal to your ATC, or wherever your total revenue equals your total cost, that is your break-even point. Okay? So we have different options when it comes to the graphs here. Okay? So in each one here, we do marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and that happens right here. We find the quantity, and we find the price, which is 5, and we find the ATC, which is here, the average cost. We find the average cost, which is here. So what's happening here? Price is up here, and ATC is down here. So price is greater than ATC, so that is economic profit. So that blue area right here is profit. What if we were to have zero profit? What would that look like? We would do the exact same steps. We would do marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That happens here. We find the quantity. We find the price. We find the ATC. And what you're going to find is that your price is also your ATC. So therefore, price equals ATC. So this is your break even or zero economic profits. And then finally, let's look at losses. Again, the same steps. Marginal revenue, marginal cost, and that happens right here. You want to think about doing this, right? But again, that's the average cost, and we don't want that. We want the marginal cost and the marginal revenue, which happens right there. Okay? So, so that's our point there. We'll find the quantity, and we'll find the price, and we'll find the ATC. And on this one, your ATC is way up here, your price is here, so ATC is greater than price, so therefore you're making economic losses. Okay. So those are our options. Okay, we either are making profits, zero profits, or losses. Okay, and all of it depends on where the price in the ATC is. So then the question becomes, yes, you're making losses, but when do you shut down? So why can a firm not avoid losses by shutting down and not producing at all? So, you're making losses, right? And so you're like, well, I might as well shut down because I'm not making money. And that's true, right? You could. But if you were to shut down, do you still have to pay something, right? Why can a firm not avoid losses? You still have to pay your fixed costs, right? Even if you produce zero quantity, you still pay the fixed cost. So that's why we need to, not just shut down. We need to figure out, okay, look, we already have to pay the fixed cost. Let's try and produce. So there's a different criteria for when we should stop producing. So then the question becomes, well, when is that point? When should a firm shut down? Well, let's do this, okay? So let's forget about the sunk cost, right? Because that's exactly what the fixed cost is. And remember, we should forget about the sunk cost and only focus on the future, the marginal cost and the marginal revenue here. Well, when should we shut down? Well, let's say the price of our t-shirt is $5. And whenever we make a t-shirt, the average total cost is 10, right? So it's like, shoot, man, every time we make a t-shirt, we're losing money. And that's true, right? You are losing money, but then it comes into play like, well, are we at least covering the variable cost, right? Because we're going to forget about the fixed cost. We want to make sure that we're at least covering the variable cost, okay? Because I got two options for you. Okay, let's say the average variable cost is $4. Okay, so that would mean that for every time you make a t-shirt, you're making it for the variable cost is $4. Okay, so at that point you're like, okay, we have to pay the rent, and we're just making losses right now, but at least we're making enough money to cover the cost of making the t-shirt. We may not be able to make money to cover the cost of the t-shirt and the rent, but we can at least pay for the t-shirt. So we should stay in business, because eventually what's going to happen here is that we could maybe change the fixed cost, right? Or in the long run, where everything is variable, right? Everything is variable. You don't have the fixed cost. At least your variable cost is $4, and you're making it for $5. Now you're making profit. So that's why in this decision here, as long as you're making more than the average variable cost, you stay in business. The other option is this. Let's say the average variable cost is $6. Well, now, every time we make a t-shirt, it's going to cost you $6, right? Minus the fixed cost. So every time you actually make a t-shirt, it costs you $6 in variable cost, but you're selling it for $5. That's where it doesn't make sense, right? Because it's like, I'm making it for $6 but selling it for $5. Every time you make a t-shirt, you're literally losing money. Like every time you make a t-shirt, you are giving it away. That right here, this is when you shut down. As soon as it costs you more money to make the individual product, the variable cost, that's when you shut down. Okay? That's the shutdown point right there. So the shutdown point is going to be wherever you're looking at the variable cost and you're looking at the price. Okay, so whenever your price is lower than the variable cost you more money to make it than you're selling it, shut down immediately. If you're making enough money to at least cover the variable cost, you should stay in business. Okay, now you should stay in business because there might be somebody who's making losses and they're going to shut down. Okay, because they didn't have enough efficiency, they're going to shut down. And so what happens there is if a firm shuts down, right, all of their customers come to you, and now you can make more t-shirts, and this could help out your profits. So that's why we don't shut down just because of the fixed cost. You look at the variable cost. Okay? So the shutdown point is going to be that intersection of the average variable cost and the marginal cost. The reason that this is the shutdown point is because when you're drawing your graph here and you have the marginal revenue and the marginal cost, you always operate here. Okay, and so guess what? If your variable cost is the same as your marginal cost right there, right, then that is showing you where your price is. So basically, if we were to have a situation like this, where we have the marginal cost and then the average variable cost here, this point right here, that's the average variable cost. The lowest price you could go before you have to shut down is here. So that is the shutdown point. So everything here, we shut down. Everything here, we're going to supply. Okay. So we call the point where the marginal cost and the average cost, no, we don't call that the break-even point. We call that the shutdown point. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. Whenever the marginal cost crosses the AC, the average total cost, that's the break-even point. Whenever the MC is equal to the average variable cost, that's the shutdown point. Okay. Anytime you're below the average cost, we are having losses, okay, because your price is less than the total cost to make it, so you're making losses. And then anything down here is the shutdown zone because you are lower than the average variable cost. Okay. So here's a little summary. Okay. If you are above the shutdown point, so here's the shutdown point. If you are above there and below the break-even point, so somewhere in here, you're making losses. If you're here, you are above the average cost, you're in the profit zone. And if you're below, right, if price is less than the shutdown point, you shut down immediately. Okay, so if you're in the pink zone here, you're going to shut down. The reason you shut down is because you can only operate where price is more than average variable cost. And since you always do price equals marginal cost, and you're going to supply, remember I told you right here, you're going to supply above the average variable cost. Guess what the supply curve for the firm is? The short run supply curve is the marginal cost above the AVC. So that's what's going on there. All right. So let's do a quick example here. Okay. So we have our total cost, which is total fixed plus total variable. So that'll be 20. That'll be 40. 20 plus 25 is 45. That'll be 55. That'll be 72. And that'll be 100. Okay. If you are confused about that, right, so pause the video, take a second, right, and then try it on your own. All we're doing is adding. The next would be average variable cost, which you remember as total variable cost divided by quantity. And so all that'll be is skip the first one, and then you'll do 20 divided by 1, 25 divided by 2, which is 12.5, 35 divided by 3, which is 11.33. Yep, 11.67. And then 52 divided by 4 should be 13. And then 80 divided by 5, which should be 16. Yep. Then we'll do average total cost, and all that is total cost divided by quantity. So that'll be 20 divided by 0, can't divide it by 0. 40 divided by 1, 40. 45 divided by 2, that should be 22.5. 55 divided by 3 should be 18.33. 72 divided by 4, 18. And 100 divided by 5, which should be 20. Then we'll find the marginal cost. Remember, marginal cost is just that change in the cost there. So that'll be 20, 5, 10, 7, 17, and then 28. I don't trust myself. 17, okay. And then we'll do total revenue. Total revenue is just price times quantity, so that'll be 0, that'll be 28, 56, 84, and then 112, 140. Okay, and then the margin revenue, you already know the margin revenue. It's equal to price. And so right off the bat here, let's figure out what is the maximum profit. Well, that's wherever the marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost, and that happens here at Q5. So how much profit are we making there? Well, total revenue is 140, total cost is 100, so 40 is the total profit there. If we were to do the one before that, that'll be 40 as well. And the one before that one should be 29. Okay. But remember, we always do marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That's the best for us. So that's how we're going to fill out this chart here. Okay. Now, what we're going to do here is we are now going to be graphing the situation. So anytime I ask you for the firm graph, right, you need to do the demand curve, and the demand curve happens at the price, and we saw that to be 28, and it's a straight line for the demand. Marginal cost is just the Nike Swish, and then the ATC, I like to stop. I don't like to draw it yet. I like to figure out if I'm making a profit first or not. So I'll go to the marginal revenue equals marginal cost. I'll find my quantity, okay, and I'll find my price here. So 28, and then at this quantity, right, am I making a profit? Yes, 40. So that means that my ATC is lower than the price. So I'm going to draw it like this. I'm going to go down, hit the minimum, and come back up. So that way my ATC is here, which is 20. So this area is my profits. So that is everything you need to draw a firm graph. You need a demand curve, marginal cost, and quantity, and ATC. And then there you can find the profit or the losses or the break-even point. Okay? In the next section, we'll talk about 8.3, which is going to be talking about the long run. I'll see you there. Bye.